So, and last, we have a relatively long agenda tonight. So if we get to 8:15 and we're not finished with the other items, I will be putting the public hearing in regard to the HDC appeal over to next week. With that, I'm going to go into the script for the remotely conducted meetings. As a preliminary matter, this is Dawn Holgate, Chair of the Nantucket Select Board. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. I will first go through the Select Board members in the order in which I see you. Jason Bridges.
Here.
Rita Higgins.
Here.
Matt Fee.
Here.
Christy Ferrantella.
Here.
We've got everyone here tonight. I will go through staff members in the order in which I see you. Let's see. Erica Mooney.
Here.
Chief Pittman.
Here.
Brian Turbot, Finance Director.
Here.
Libby Gibson, Town Manager.
Here.
Roberto Santamaria, Health and Human Services Director.
Here.
Amy Baxter.
Here.
Janet Schulte.
Here.
Jeff Carlson.
Here.
Leslie Snell. People are jumping around a little bit. Hopefully I'm getting and let's see. Oh, Sheila Lucy. She's just connecting. Sheila, can you hear me? Sheila Lucy?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Then we have some other attendees here tonight. We have Steve Visco from the Board of Health.
Here.
Denise Crono from the Finance Committee.
Here.
We have Alicia Carney.
Here.
Joe Hale.
Here.
And Martha Turk is present.
Here.
And last but not least, we have John Giorgio, our town council, and it is his birthday today.
Thank you, Dawn.
Happy birthday.
I'm here.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Okay. And now the rest of this. We are now using Zoom webinar for our meetings, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Attendees must register to participate. The registration link is unique to the meeting. The registration link can be found in the description of the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed for the meeting. People registering to be an attendee must use their names, otherwise they will not be allowed to participate in discussion so that we can identify you. Attendees will join in listening mode. They can click the raise hand button if they wish to speak. The chair will call on those who have raised hands in the order in which they were raised at the appropriate time. If you do not have an audio capable device, we were using a function called Q&A, but we've had a very significant hacking problem happening with that. So the other option is to, when you do register, if you don't have audio, you can call in from a regular phone line and the information will be provided in the email for your registration. All questions should be directed through the chair, as in any meeting. The open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order you will find posted with the agenda materials. It allows all public bodies to meet entirely remotely. And allows the public to follow along with deliberations in the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation. However, we will feature public comment as previously noted. We're using Zoom conference. Meeting materials can be found on the town website unless otherwise noted. The public is able to follow along with all of our meeting materials. And we are now turning to the first agenda item as noted. Please raise your hand as you wish to speak and I will call on you. And please remember to mute your computer when you are not speaking and avoid sharing your screen as it will be captured by the recording, and please speak clearly to ensure accurate minutes and wait for the chair to yield the floor to you. The select board meeting is being audio and video recorded, if that wasn't clear already. I wanted to make a statement to start the meeting. These past days and weeks have once again shown a spotlight on the tremendous injustices that exist in our society. We want to express that we stand with our community and will not remain silent as they express the anguish, anger, and deep frustration with systems and practices that oppress and devalue Black lives in Massachusetts and the United States of America. Racism and injustice cannot be tolerated. This past Monday, our island community came together for a peaceful protest to honor the life of George Floyd that was so tragically taken. This protest was organized by our youth, our next generation of Nantucketers. We are so proud of them, and they have highlighted that our community needs to do better. We must stand together to speak out about systemic racism and drive meaningful change. Now is the time to put any feelings of discomfort aside, to educate ourselves further, to work past our own ignorance and fear. Our community of color needs us to be better and to do better. We will commit ourselves to not being silent and to dedicate ourselves in our leadership positions in facilitating greater community conversation, engagement, and actions towards change. We know there is a lot of work to do. Nantucket has been a leader for the world in many things. Let us continue that tradition. This will be an agenda item next week, and we will be putting together potential action items for discussion of how we can help. And I want to turn to the town manager because she has a statement that she would like to make, and then the chief of police.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well said. I believe I'm an honest person with integrity. It is difficult not to react when that is questioned. It is even more difficult for me and or my family members to actually be accused of something we did not do. It is hard to understand why people would do this. I met with someone yesterday who explained why some people might develop this opinion and these accusations. It was a perspective I had not previously thought about, and it opened my eyes to a different way of thinking. I don't want to be a town official who is mistrusted. I don't want the town government to be mistrusted. In my job, it is easy to dismiss other ways of thinking because it can take up a lot of time and effort. Sometimes it's difficult to see the forest through the trees, not to see the forest through the trees. In thinking over the discussion I had yesterday, I realized that I probably need help to develop other ways of thinking and approaches which need to evolve as our population becomes and has become more diverse. I would welcome a race relations equity forum program to help me and my team to more clearly and easily examine and utilize approaches that would make us more approachable and make our operations, decisions, and actions more transparent. I would like to be part of such an effort. We can always do better. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know a big question out there is any information in regard to the vandalism on the African Meeting House, and the chief does have a little bit of an update for us in that matter.
Thank you, Chairperson Holgate. I want to echo what Town Manager said too. Although I think the Nantucket Police Department has done a lot in the last decade to try to improve the practices and the quality of our officers and our relationship with the community in which we police together, we can always do more. And we're meeting on a regular basis with other police departments. Today we had a meeting with the Barnstable County Human Rights Commission, all the police chiefs, in which we got a whole bunch of ideas on things we can do to improve the communication, the training, other things. And those meetings are going to continue. But as far as the African Meeting House is concerned, as there's a lot of confusion as to how an investigation like that takes place. And as many of you know, we had to pass the investigation off to the state police because of the unfortunate allegations that were being made that we couldn't really talk about because there's juveniles involved and other things like that. But I was able to reach out to the state police and the district attorney's office. And what I've learned is the investigation is still very much alive, and it's actually been taken over by the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, which is actually a good sign as far as progress goes on the investigation. So while there has been no arrest made, I do expect that there'll be some visible action within the next few months. Now, what everybody's got to remember is we've been hampered because the courts have been closed down due to the COVID. That has really slowed things down all around on that issue, but it didn't put it asleep. It's still very much alive.
Thank you. Appreciate the update. Other board members, I'll turn to you if there's any additional statements you'd like to make. Jason?
I was trying to wait to see if Rita and Christy wanted to go first. I wrote down a lot of my thoughts. I don't forget some of it, so I apologize if I'm reading a little bit. I think our approach and our priorities have to change when it comes to racial equity. It needs to be brought into all of our best practices, to our HR department, to all our departments, to our police department. It was great to hear that Chief Pittman is already digging into that. It's our hiring practices, our communication, our compassionate. We need to have a compassionate approach, take a different mindset. We need to create spaces for people of color to be heard. It has to be a major priority issued from the select board. It needs to start from us. We cannot speak for people of color, but we can show them that they are supported and we are advocating and we're trying to lift those voices. And right now, there is no space for anybody to speak or be heard. And so I want to, whatever we come up with next week, or if we come up with something even tonight, that is a main priority for me. But I think we have to be really sensitive to it. This is a group of white people, and we can't just, it's easy for us to, because we're so passionate, to come in and say, we need to do this, this, and this. We need to know what our community of color, what our Black community wants from us. What do they want? So I would love to have a task force created. We could call it work group task force that's led by the community, that is supported by the town, funded by nonprofits, funded by the town. Maybe there's it's a way for everybody in the community to fund it, and ask our community of color what do they want, because they might not want racial equity training. That might not be enough. So I think it has to come from them, and then we have to listen and we have to support. Thank you.
Christy?
Yeah, I similarly wrote down some things that, it's really hard to find the right words, but we can't continue to be silent. And I know that Jason and I have been talking about kind of what things that the town can do, but also what can we do as a community. And just to echo, I think it's really important for us to start the brainstorming process, but bring in other people, and especially people of color, to help us decide what those action items are going to be. Today, I kept writing down the question of, what does justice look like if we don't find out who did the African Meeting House? How do we build that trust back? As Libby was saying, how do we make people trust the government, trust our process, be transparent? And we can't do that by putting up a wall and kind of getting defensive every time we're called out. And it's really hard. The last meeting we had, it was really difficult and raw, and my voice is already getting a little cracked just thinking about it. It's really personal. All of us, we didn't know what to do, and I think we all have work to do, and we need to do better, and we need to find the tools, and that means looking into racial equity training, and helping us better process so that we don't burn those bridges and that we're building this community. You know, we were elected to serve everybody on Nantucket, and that's what we have to do. Thank you.
Rita?
Yeah, you know, echoing really both what Jason and Christy have said, but I think it's, you know, it really feels like coupling listening with action and finding humility. And you know, Christy, I think you're right. It's it goes beyond who's a good person, who's not. It's you know, I think if we're going to really tackle racism on the island, excuses, defensiveness, explanation of how much good we're doing isn't really acceptable. It's not breaking the cycle of generations of systemic racism. And I think that what I've learned over the past couple of days is that violence takes a lot more forms than the physical. It's felt, you know, in some ways like we're so far removed from it, but going back to that last meeting and speaking to people who experience it every day, violence comes in many ways, and you know, we've seen a lot of silence as violence and inaction as violence, and I would like to see this board, and I do have faith after this conversation and going forward that we will find ways to make a difference every day, because nothing short of changing everyday habits, I think, will change this. And you know, I also think that over the past 2 months, some of the changes that we've already made in our everyday would have been unthinkable 2 months ago. If you told me 2 months ago I was going to carry a mask with me everywhere, you know, it just, who would have thought we'd be doing that? But I think we've been primed to make change every single day. And I think we can apply the attitude of a public health crisis, a state of emergency towards racism on the island and in the country. And I think we can work to change our habits every single day. And I think for me, that starts with questioning my privilege and looking at it through other people's eyes. So thank you, Dawn and Christy and Jason. You know, we haven't heard from Matt yet, but you know, I'll have 2 meetings, this one and one more left. And I know that this is going to be something that will continue to be discussed. And thank you to Chief for following up.
You guys said it all way better than I would. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. We will continue this conversation next week. Census, Martha Turk.
Yeah, I like to actually read a little statement as well that I prepared. I'm connected with complete count committees all over the state and all over the country, and national organizations working on census education and outreach. And I just wanted to say thank you all for your recognition of this really important conversation and your commitment to carrying it forward. Census complete count committees across the country, in direct or in indirect partnership with state and national census advocacy and outreach groups affiliated with organizations such as the Leadership Council Conference on Civil and Human Rights, are reflecting on the events of the last week in the context of historical racial injustice. Some have pressed pause on their Get Out the Count efforts to honor the lives of George Floyd and the growing list of individuals who have lost their lives, specifically at the hands of law enforcement, but also given the suffering that the Black community has endured. Nantucket's Complete Count Committee acknowledges that communities of color, especially Black communities, are historically among the most undercounted. We all deserve to be counted and seen in the census in order to give everyone a voice in terms of political representation and to ensure that everyone has the resources they need to deserve and to thrive. We all count for Nantucket, regardless of who we are, what we look like, where we're from, who we love. Remember to count everyone in your home. Take 10 minutes to take the census today, 2020census.gov. Our current response rate is just over 23%, with rates between 31 and 42% in the Mid-Island tracts. Census Bureau is actively, again, recruiting census takers on Nantucket. Jobs pay $22 an hour and more. They include paid training and flexible hours. Information at 2020census.gov/jobs. The contactless hand delivery of questionnaires has indeed begun. If you've lost, misplaced, or do not have a form, you can still take the census online using your residential address. And that's my report for this week. Thank you for having me. Happy to take questions if you have them, but I know you have a long agenda.
Thank you, Martha. Everyone, please do the census.
Thank you.
Next, we have the annual town election announcement. Libby?
So the annual town election is Tuesday, June 16th. The polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And we are encouraging mail-in voting to limit the number of people at the polls. The mail-in voting instructions are online on the town website. The town clerk did a great video on how to easily prepare your mail-in vote. The annual town meeting for 2020 is now scheduled. Hopefully people know this, Thursday, June 25th, starting at 5 p.m. at the high school. We are working on quite a bit of outreach on this, which I will get to a little bit later in the agenda when the annual town meeting discussion comes up. But we would really like people to know and participate in 2 pre-annual town meeting forums. The first one is next Tuesday, June 9th at 5. The next one is Thursday, June 18th, also at 5. The Nantucket Civic League, I believe, has agreed to moderate the meeting, the forum. And the moderator will take us through how we're going to do town meeting. And we will review safety measures, procedures, how the rooms are going to be set up, and what the warrant is going to look like. We are putting forward a pared down warrant, and the moderator will explain how that will work, and we will take questions. I think that's it for announcements.
Thank you. COVID-19 weekly update. Select board have anything that they would like to bring up first? And obviously public comment will remain open throughout this if people want to raise their hand. Okay, seeing none. Is there a public health update?
So we're doing pretty well. So one of the things about that we should probably discuss, and I kind of want to put it with all the conversations that we're having actually, as a minority living on Nantucket, it is really important to understand the view of everything that we've been seeing. As a Hispanic that grew up in South Florida, I've seen some of the nastiest parts of what the United States has to offer. And Massachusetts has been pretty rough. We like to believe that with our liberal mindset that we are better than most, but we're not. So I'm really glad to hear the conversation. Nantucket is probably the best community I've worked with. I remember my first job in the state of Massachusetts. My welcome to work gift was a sombrero. For those of you who know, I'm not Mexican. So I'm really glad to hear this conversation happening. I really applaud the staff and the select board for everything we're doing and everything you're doing. It's a difficult conversation to have, and I really appreciate it. Chief, Libby have been some of the best people I've worked with, and some of the most open-minded people. Our police force, on every interaction I've had with them, not all of them, I have screwed up a few times, running stop signs and stuff. And every time I never felt afraid of our police force here. And I can't say that for other places in the United States. So I'm really glad to see where we're going. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you.
As far as the COVID update goes, okay, we have a total of 100,000 cases in the state of Massachusetts. We actually crossed that threshold this week. We've been paying attention to how things are going, the trends in the state of Massachusetts since Memorial Day. As far as on Nantucket goes, we're actually going we're going strong, knock on wood, without any new cases here. So if things are going really well. So we look forward to mirroring the governor's orders tomorrow at tomorrow's Board of Health meeting. So that's really good. We're going to be discussing today's order, the dining out order, which I believe is going to be really good for helping kickstart our economy. As far as the metrics go, we're seeing very good positive trends. We're going forward, and we're going forward on how we're seeing the COVID on the island, which is still 0. We are, for those who don't know, it was brought to our attention that we haven't been really good at getting the information out about the sewer testing. We spoke with David Gray. They are continuing to do the sewer testing every 2 weeks. We'll be doing that testing. So we are looking at the prevalence. The last one that came back did also still come back as a non-detect, which is really good. There is no one actively shedding virus on the island in our sewer system. The PCR and serology testing that was funded by FinCom is going to start moving forward. We will be releasing a statement out to all our businesses on the island, as well as all of our communities, on how to get the self-pay portion for those who are willing to pay themselves to get the PCR testing. But we are also looking to prioritize the funding that we did get to some of our first responders, our medical personnel, home health aides, our most at-risk groups, and then we'll move from there. So look forward to getting some information on that. But otherwise, I think we're in great shape.
Oh, question from Jason?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Roberto, when we were talking with the finance committee, I remember Peter Schaefer asking, could we set it up to where, businesses could pay, put some money into the pot so we could, extend that money, with that grant. Is that what you were referring to? That we'll be able to?
Yes, that's exactly what we're looking at. So what we're going to be doing is if a business is willing to pay for employees to get funded, we're setting up a mechanism for that, and that information is going to be sent out with our press release. Sorry.
Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Sounds like you pretty much covered number 3 as well.
Which is, I don't have an agenda in front of me.
Shall we segue right into the Economic Recovery Task Force recommendations and updates?
Sure.
There was anything else on the emergency orders? Steve's here. John Giorgio?
Madam Chairman, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to talk about the outdoor dining order that I believe is before the board tonight and will be before the Board of Health tomorrow.
Yes, I think it is the appropriate time.
Oh, would you like me to explain what's going on? So the governor issued his COVID-19 Order 35. And it provides for the chief executive of the town, which of course is the select board, to approve the process for allowing restaurants to expand their service area to outdoor table service. And what's significant about this is that when the governor issued his order, which I guess was Monday, it indicates that the provisions of Chapter 40A relative to zoning essentially do not apply. And he also indicated in his order that the licensing authority, which in this case is the select board, could issue a change of premises license without a public hearing. So we initially drafted this order that is on the screen and is before you tonight for consideration. The thing to keep in mind about this, however, is that today a bill was before the House that pretty much mirrored the governor's emergency order, but it still contained a provision that required a public hearing by the licensing authority before a change of premises could be issued. And but at about 3 o'clock this afternoon, by amendment, that provision was stricken from the bill, and the House then engrossed the bill and sent it back to the Senate. And I believe the Senate will be considering it at 11 a.m. tomorrow morning. They had to recess today because of some protests at the State House. Erica, could you scroll down a little bit in the order for me? So that's good. So you'll see that part in red line. And we inserted this today because of the provisions in the bill that required a public hearing. We're not entirely sure at this point whether the public hearing will be required when the bill is finally approved and signed by the governor. But we're recommending that this language remain in the order because it only applies, i.e. the hearing, if it is required by law. And so whatever the legislature does is going to determine whether or not a public hearing is going to be required. So the rest of the order is the same as we've previously provided to you. And I'm not sure if you would like me to go through the provisions of the order. I could do that quickly, Madam Chair. Okay, I will do that. Give me just half a moment here. So outdoor table service, which is what is permitted, is defined as service area outside of the restaurant building envelope, whether sidewalk, patio, deck, lawn, parking area, or other outdoor space. The outdoor table service may be provided under awnings or table umbrellas or other cover from the elements, provided, however, that at least 50% of the perimeter of any dining area must remain open and unobstructed. Handicapped parking spaces may not be utilized. We have a provision in here that would allow the expansion onto town-owned beaches of dining areas, but that would require the approval of both the Board of Health and the Select Board. And if they wish to expand onto a private beach, they'd obviously need the permission of the owner and the Board of Health. This draft order was vetted by Planning and Land Use Services, and they have made a few very helpful changes. But in essence, in paragraph 1, we make it clear that a temporary reduction of on-site parking, temporary erection of a tent structure for a period exceeding 30 days, and/or temporary encroachments into a required setback shall not be deemed as zoning violations. So the way that this would work is, if you approve this order, the restaurant would make application to the Planning and Land Use Services for approval of a new seating plan. That would be referred to the Board of Health. It would also involve review by the licensing agent as well as the fire chief. And if they determine that the seating plan did not pose a threat to public safety or have an unreasonable impact on the neighborhood, the building commissioner would approve the outdoor seating plan. We also provide that it has to be in compliance with applicable provisions of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Paragraph 7 is the one I started off with. It has to do with the change of premises, can be approved by the select board. It doesn't, we don't think it's going to require a public hearing, but we're going to just have to wait to see that. The outdoor seating would be subject to all of the physical distancing, workplace safety, face covering requirements that may be applicable. So those are all incorporated into this order. There's a provision for sanitizing tables before and after use. Let's just see here. The order would remain in effect until November 1st, 2020. And it can be modified if and when the governor authorizes indoor seating. As you know, right now, only outdoor seating is going to be permitted at restaurants. The Board of Health and the Select Board could also amend or rescind this order at any time, but it's intended to expire on November 1st, which is what the governor has said in his COVID-35 order. And then we just have the normal enforcement provisions, which are essentially paragraphs 15 through 19. And so that's the order, and it's up for consideration by the select board tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Steve Visco, sorry, and then there's other hands. I couldn't see you all until just now.
Sean, I was wondering with the select board tonight, is in this meeting, is this something that they could approve without having a joint meeting with the Board of Health, and possibly tomorrow night we just adopt the order as it's written, or do we have to have a joint meeting?
No, I think. Oh, sorry, John.
No, go ahead.
That we ratify it tonight, and then you do tomorrow, and that satisfies.
Yes.
All of that, and then if we do want to do any amendments as things change, we can do that. Obviously, with both boards voting either together or separately. Jason, and then Christy.
Yeah, just some points of clarification. I think the order is great and it's going to be really helpful. And then now restaurants will know how to adapt, and now they can start making decisions and start planning. So thanks for doing all the work on this. Number 15, just question on the enforcement. What extra enforcement would be there that the Board of Health doesn't already have, or the health department? And then why a police officer? Is the police officer be the enforcement because it's liquor? Is that who would usually enforce those type of things?
Well, typically with non-criminal disposition, Jason, which is the writing of a ticket, that's typically the police department that would enforce through non-criminal disposition, although it can be obviously the Board of Health and the building commissioner. So I think it's going to depend upon how the board wants to deal with, for example, making available sidewalks or public ways. Some towns, I'm not suggesting this, but some towns have actually closed down streets and put out tables and allowed encroachments within the public way. And I think there's going to, if you do decide you want to do that and make that available, there would be, there would be some public safety issues that are going to be addressed, and that would be appropriately through the police department. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. If anybody else wants to pop in, I just wanted to make sure and be clear what they would be doing there. I assumed it was for liquor, but that makes sense too. If it's in the public way, and they would be writing the tickets, not the health department.
So the way this would work is if a restaurant wanted to extend the outdoor seating into the public way or on a sidewalk, they would put that in this outdoor seating plan that they would submit to Plus. And in addition to approval by the building commissioner, after consulting with Amy and the others, the other departments, it would have to come back to the select board to grant permission for them to occupy on a temporary basis a portion of the public way. It wouldn't have to come back to you for approval of all seating plans, but only those that were where town property was affected.
Christy had her hand up first, and then I'll go to Amy right after.
I just wanted to clarify that a little bit, John, which you were just touching on. So every time it will have to come back to the select board or the Board of Health. Just trying to think through process, since this might be going into effect in phase 2, which may begin Monday. So kind of what would that process look like here?
So if I'm a restaurant owner, I would make an application. Oh, Amy, I'm sorry. You go ahead.
No, yeah,
I jumped ahead. I apologize.
No, not at all. And you don't know all the background, obviously, and I just want to make sure folks know we did start, and I think I included everyone in here on this this week, is giving application to all the restaurants that included all these considerations to get them started thinking on plans and to give us their plans, their ideas, their thoughts, from extending into a parking lot to if they possibly want to consider a public way, so that we can look at it all together. We have a group together already working through this in anticipation of these things coming down. So I just wanted to be clear that that application, as you know, we talked a little bit the other day, has gone out. So I don't want folks to be worried out there that they have to put together another application. That's already in process. And we already have the working group together and are working through these ideas and plans. And this will help kind of focus the process as well. So hopefully that answers that part of that question.
Do we anticipate having a little bit of a flood of applications come in by the end of the week? And should we consider holding a special select board meeting just to hear these?
We've had already received, I'll tell you, I've already gotten over a dozen, probably 15 or more, and I know others coming in as well already. So it's going to depend too, as John had mentioned, if they take that public hearing out, then that'll be a little bit easier to do as a group. We certainly would present it to you, but if it's a public hearing and it's required for each one, that would probably require a specific meeting for that, because there'll be over 20 for sure.
Assuming the public hearing requirement is waived, because then if it is a public hearing, obviously we have weeks of advertising we have to do, which is unfortunate. But hopefully, I think that there's that recognition. They probably will waive it. When could we do a meeting next week? I'm sure Erica probably may have thoughts on what would be available to us.
If you, next week is pretty busy for 4. Tuesday, it would have to be in the morning. That's our date of our first annual town meeting forum. Wednesday, we only have the 5 o'clock select board meeting scheduled. Thursday the 11th is pretty full. There's 1 o'clock ZBA and 5 o'clock Concom. So again, it would have to be early in the morning, and then Friday is wide open.
I mean, I would vote for Monday, but Christy, what's your availability? I know daytime can be difficult, and I don't know about the rest of the board.
Yeah, I was just going to say Monday, just since that might be when the phase is starting. But I'm available all afternoon.
And we could schedule the meeting and then cancel it if we don't need it.
Okay. Yes, exactly. Amy had her hand up, and Leslie.
We wanted to level set a little bit as far as timing on some of this too as well. There's going to be different levels of application. If you did something Monday, we're waiting for the governor. We'll determine phase 2 on Saturday, apparently. The first thing is going to be those that have current outdoor space. That'll probably be the easiest for folks to get together and get that spacing in. The second will be those that have a parking lot or adjacent space that they can move into quickly. That'll be level 2. Level 3 might be some that have to do some sort of adjacent property of another owner. And then we're going to have to consider larger things that people are looking to go into public space or that don't have any outdoor areas, that are looking for other ideas or other ways to provide service outdoors. So I just want to level set that we have those different levels, that it may not be everything. If you want to do something on Monday, the larger ones that might require a street closure or something of that sort might take more time. So I just wanted to level set on that.
Okay, Leslie?
And just to add to what Amy said, we are still waiting on the governor's order. We're still waiting on the Board of Health tomorrow. This is all sort of breaking news to all of these restaurants. And while I know they're very excited to come in with their plans, they have to prepare some of this stuff, and we need a little bit of time on the staff level to review it. So, a meeting earlier in the week may not be as productive for the select board as even midweek, depending on, the tiers of what we're reviewing.
Okay. Libby?
Just going to mention that depending on what does or doesn't get done tonight, you have, I don't want to jinx it, but at the moment, a fairly light agenda next week. Maybe there would be some you could do that are ready, or, more ready than others, so you could kind of quickly get through. Just a thought.
John Giorgio?
So forgive me if I'm making an assumption here, but I want to make sure the select board members know that there are only 2 parts of this that are subject to your approval. One would be the revised licensing area under the liquor statutes, or if they want to use public property, including a public way. If neither one of those are in play, the way this order is set up is it would be the Board of Health and the building commissioner that would actually approve the seating plan.
Okay, so we won't have to see all of them.
No, that's correct.
Okay. And that was kind of the intent. Matt?
Yeah, I support this. I think it'll be really important. The numbers I'm hearing from the restaurants that have tried to do takeout is frightening, anywhere from 75% down to 96, 98% down. People are even trying to be open. So this is definitely needed. Some of the concerns people have shared with me are fairness, because if we open up one street and not another, we are going to be picking winners and losers. So that's really important to sort of think it through holistically for the common good for everybody, if we can figure that out. And the other part is, I'd like to know, is staff, how far has staff gotten on road closures and sidewalks, et cetera? Is that, is staff supportive of that? Is public safety weighed in already? Where are we there, Amy?
I was just going to let Amy go, but with a preface. We had a little implementation group meeting earlier in the week, and one of our sort of themes, I think, was a one-size-fits-all approach to street and sidewalk closures is probably not going to work for the exact reason, Matt, that you just said. There may be unintended consequences with one street closing, which might benefit one or two places, but not benefit the others. So we were thinking about a more kind of customized approach that involves the input of the police department, just knowing, how traffic flows go and things like that. And the restaurant owners themselves who have maybe expressed interest in this. But Amy has been doing a massive amount of work on this. So I would let her fill in the details on that, where we are with it.
Yeah, thank you. And Matt, that point is definitely something that internally was brought up. We did discuss a couple of ideas that would be easy to close off, but it would only benefit a small fraction. One thing that's going to come into play, as we've mentioned, is ADA requirements, obviously with a lot of cobblestone streets and things of that sort. If it's not accessible, that's going to be difficult too. But what we're trying to do here is we're taking in all these ideas. I've asked folks to give us even pie in the sky thoughts that we can look together and see how we can work this through. I'm starting to set up the Zoom calls this week with folks based on location, doing the core tomorrow. I think we have a 8 a.m. call with some folks as well, just to start talking about them in groups in their area, and so that we can work together on that as well. As far as sidewalks, streets. And then we're also, and thanks to the chamber for helping set up something with retailers on Friday as well to understand their concerns, because the take up curbside delivery model is going to be going throughout the summer. So we have to, as we saw, like we had the example in Edgartown, looking at what they were doing as well. Some folks liked some of the closed streets, others didn't because they needed curbside pickup and delivery. So it's going to be quite a balancing act there too as well. So that's why we've asked for all of them to come in with these ideas so that we can kind of look at them together. And that's what's happening right now. So next few days, it's a lot of conversations and a lot of going through these plans, but they've been coming through fast and furious. So everyone's really working on that.
Okay, so it sounds like because the things that we might act on are going to be much more involved, if anything's ready, we can put it on for Wednesday, but maybe the beginning of the week, if we feel like we need an extra meeting, we'll call one later in the week, or we'll call one for early the following week, something like that. Does that make sense to everybody? And it sounds like you'll be able to deal with the things that are a little bit more simple to deal with without us. Christy?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to move forward. And I think it's really encouraging to hear how open Amy and the staff has been about kind of give me your pie in the sky ideas and what ways to work that way. It's good to not just hear a direct no, but how can we make it work? And just to put it out there too, I hope that there's kind of thought put into what resources are needed if there's more staff needed at Plus to process these applications, just to get things moving as quickly as possible for businesses. So thank you guys for everything you're doing.
Jason?
Yeah, thank you for the town staff, Libby, Amy, Leslie, everybody who's involved. Sorry if I forgot anybody. Making this a priority, it's going to make a big difference. Madam Chair, I think we can do as much as, on Wednesday. I like that idea. Maybe because a lot of these are going to be, most of the work's going to be done. And I'm not saying we're ratifying it, but we're looking at it. And so if we have to call a meeting and only 3 or 4 of us need to be there, I think that's okay. Right. So if we can only find a time, just as an example, at Friday at 1 and 3 of us can be there, then I would be okay with that.
Okay. Oh, Rita?
I just want to echo that I think getting this in place so the restaurants can respond as quickly as possible is ideal. So I would definitely agree with Jason on that one.
Okay. Leslie?
I just want to add one more procedural thing for any of the restaurant people who may be listening right now. Amy and I have talked about filtering all of the requests through her office and through the form that she already sent out to everyone. So if you need to apply to Plus, as is referenced in the order, just fill out the application and send it through that way, and she'll get it over to us.
All right. Very, very good. I think that we do need a vote. If someone is ready to make the motion on the order.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, I didn't mention at the beginning of the meeting that we will be doing all votes by roll call. I will call on you in the order in which I see you. Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Rita Higgins.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Christy Tarantella.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. It's really nice today because all the board members are across the top of my screen. I don't know if it's that way for everybody, but it's helpful. So then the Board of Health, I think, will take this up tomorrow. Steve, I don't know if you need to stay on, but you're welcome to. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask if this order is going to have another specific number, or is it just going to be the outdoor dining order?
I suppose it's probably going to be order number 11, right?
That would be the.
John,
Is it numbered like?
Number?
It is. I will make it order number 11. Okay, I'll make that change. And if we know tomorrow that the legislature has approved the version of the bill without the public hearing requirement, I'd like the board's permission to just revise that paragraph 7 to bring it back to the way it was.
Is everyone okay with that? Jason, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think I just looking at the title. Do we need to make it an emergency order? But I guess I'm reading the title and it actually says it right in there.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's about that it's, even though it's a little bit different, it's kind of loosening restrictions. It's in place for a certain period of time and it's due to the COVID situation. So does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Why it's an emergency order? Okay. All right. We do, I'm assuming, still have further economic recovery task force updates beyond the order?
There's a few more things. I'll be quick about them. Yeah, I'll just go by the categories. There's a communications category, sharing the governor's reopening advisory board guidelines and the state's reopening plan regarding regulations for business reopening. We've developed, as we reviewed with you last week, a back to business a back to business toolkit. And as the state's sector, workplace sector, whatever they're called, industry workplace standards, I forget the whole name of it, the requirements to open the various industries. As those come online with the state, we are putting them in the toolkit so that they're as up to date as possible for the various industries. There was a recommendation to develop a video promoting the island. I believe Janet is working with the chamber on that video. Comprehensive written communication for visitors and seasonal residents that describe the situation on the island. Those are online. Signage regarding mask requirements and recommendations in high visibility areas. Those are out there and getting out there, and templates are being given to businesses. There's just a few other things about encouraging education with mask wearing and things of that nature, which we are working on. The recommendation to hire and place ambassadors at all points of entry. This is our COVID educator program, and in this week's paper, there should be an ad for them. Hopefully we will get some good applicants, and we'll get them hired as soon as possible and trained and outfitted, and they will be able to interact with the public and businesses as to public health protocols with COVID-19. The use of public spaces, streets, and sidewalks, we just discussed. The use of public spaces and outdoor access. This had to do with using pocket parks and potential other areas, open space areas for maybe takeout dining and things like that. That I think is still kind of in the works, but different approaches were being explored. The use of public spaces with parking changes and allowing street closures that we just talked about. Various parking areas in downtown and mid-island potentially to be used for dining areas. Again, that is in the works as well. Temporary regulation changes or other temporary relaxation of rules. For example, the display of merchandise and wares, we talked about that. That won't be a blanket. Everybody can display everything they want for a variety of reasons. But if people let us know what it is that they want to put outside, we'll take a look and probably in most cases, okay it. There was just a lot of, it's hard to find things on the state website sometimes, maybe even on the town website, but we've really tried to consolidate all of this information in one area to make it easier for people. We have a pretty good search on the town website. We're also going to be using things like act.net and the radio. We got a great person, Brian Glowacki, to tape 3 commercials on the radio. I don't know if anybody's heard them yet, but he did a really nice job with it, and we will update those as the summer goes on, hopefully. And so we're really moving along with this thing. I don't know if Amy, Janet, or Leslie want to add anything. Rachel's been working with us as well. Right, Janet? Oh, sorry.
I just want to say that we're working to put those radio ads on the town website too, and we'll use Daybreak Nantucket to refer to them so more people will see them if they don't have access to ACK-FM, so that the word will get out about what's going on and what the new normal is for Nantucket and COVID-19.
Thank you, Janet. I know there's been a question as well. Maybe Leslie can just address it about tent events, I guess I would call them, with respect to events that have had to be canceled, and people wanting to reschedule them next year, sort of double up on them, although there may be some restrictions as to that now, but I'm not sure where that stands, but maybe Leslie does. So the emergency order that we just talked about does not cover anything past November 1st of 2020. And what people are asking about are tents that were scheduled for weddings on private property. Can they reschedule those to next year, or private events on private property, and basically increase the number of tented events that they're allowed to have? So that would currently be a zoning violation. So in order to address that, it would need to be addressed either through some type of zoning change, or two, a different emergency order when the time comes, if that's necessary. So that needs a lot more discussion, and it's something we can certainly talk about. But I think at this point, it's premature to take any action on that.
Okay, that question does keep it keeps coming up. Matt? Matt, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry. Could that be through Board of Appeals on a case-by-case basis, or how would it be handled?
So it would require a variance to exceed the number of allowed tented events on private property that's residentially zoned. So there's a difference in our regulations between residential property and commercial. But it could be handled on a case-by-case basis.
Matt? Oh.
Yeah, and then going back to what Libby was talking about, we're talking about having COVID educators, and I think that's great. I also think the police, the summer specials, the lifeguards, any officials that interact with the public should be, also, be able to ask for people to wear masks and do the right thing. We're doing it in businesses when people are coming up. We have signage, and I think it's an education, and I don't think we can count we're probably already planning to do that, but I don't think we can count on a few COVID educators. Everybody has to have a role. That's one comment. And the other is, I think the handouts should be at the boats and planes. I think that people, before they get here, should sort of get something small and simple, that outlines how we're handling things.
Thank you, Matt. We certainly will be training the summer officers and the lifeguards to remind people, although the lifeguard's main role is not to go around reminding people. The lifeguard's main role is to keep their eyes on the water. But that being said, to the extent possible, they will help do that. I really would like to acknowledge Leslie, Janet, and Amy and Rachel for their work on this. They have spent hours and put many, many documents together. And Amy, I know, and probably everybody else has been working a lot of weekends on this. So thank you guys very much for your work.
Yes, thank you. Jason?
I was going to touch on what Matt was saying. I like the idea of having handouts of, join our success, here's what to do. 80% of the people might already know that, but it might help the other 20%. I think it's important. My question, Matt, is I wonder if the planes and the boat lines, Steamship Highline, might already be doing that, or they might already have their own thing. They might be able to provide that, or we might be able to collaborate with them, right? Or we can always make it, design them and print them out and give them to them. But we should check first and see if they're not already ready to do that.
I think that they do all have signage up, is my understanding. I am a little bit concerned about actually handing out pieces of paper in light of COVID. Wondering if when you go online to book your reservation, or I think that they are sending out some kind of statement. Christy, I think, knows.
I'm not sure about the transportation, but I do know that lodging has been talking about in real estate that when they send packets to visitors, they're putting information about the guidelines and wearing a mask. And the chamber has been promoting kind of buy your mask from a local retailer before you arrive, and then you're supporting a business and having a mask when you arrive.
Don raises a very good point about the handout, because one of the guidance is, limit things that you hand to people. So we don't want to go against that. But Janet did a little work today on what the boats have, and there's quite a bit of signage on there, right? Right, Janet?
Yes, there's a lot of signage at the steamship on both sides. They're going to do a signage review to see how they can make it more consistent because there's so much signage, it's confusing. And Highline is taking the template that the town is using and putting it on their boats. They didn't have anything in Spanish, so I think that's a great addition to their efforts. They were quite responsive.
Great. And I mean, I was just thinking that rather than actual paper handouts that people will take and throw in the trash and could carry COVID on it, that if they got something electronically when they book their ticket, little reminders, that kind of thing. And I think the real estate offices can do more electronically as well, in hotels and so forth, with people booking in and right before they arrive. Janet?
I can look into my contacts at the steamship and the Highline tomorrow to see if they would add something in when they send out a reservation reminder. And I'll talk with Christy to find out what the realtors are doing to see if we can just send that along as a reminder for folks making reservations.
Yeah, a key point. I don't think everywhere there is vigilant about masks as Nantucket has been. And that's definitely a point that we want to get out there to people to come with your gear, and bring your hand sanitizer and toilet paper with you, ideally too. Are we good with that agenda item? Do we have a PIO update?
Yes. On the website, activity has slowed a little bit since last week. It's the first dip in activity since March 8th. 29,000 hits last week, which is about 5,000 less from the week before. We attribute that potentially to less activity by the town and the Board of Health and no need to apply online as much for the various waivers and things from construction and landscaping. Activity, though, is still 139% over the same 12-week period as of last year. Comparing January 1 to June 1, 2019 versus 2020, we have had 420,000 hits since January 1 on the town website, which is almost double that of 2019. The COVID pages are still the highest percentage visits by far. And just looking over, media requests, we had one from CNBC Closing Bell. And I think, Dawn, did that ever happen?
No, it didn't. We were supposed to talk on Friday, and then I've emailed her a couple of times to follow up, and we did not connect. So I'm thinking maybe it's not happening.
Okay. But those are much less than they were. We're on continually updating the Back to Business Toolkit, as I mentioned, and a lot of other material for employees as well. We have a weekly call with the Inky. We did those radio ads that Brian Galacki did for us. We haven't done any press releases lately, and a number of social media posts, which are continuing on. And that's it for the PIO report. With regard to town services, we are sort of in the final stages of our workplace reopening standards to bring employees back to work or get them set up to work remotely or have staggered schedules, along with all of the other things that have to be done in the workplace, sanitizing stations and markings and signage and reviewing 25% occupancy issues where applicable. It is a very significant amount of work. We've had a lot of things done in the town building. Thank you, DPW. They came in last week and sort of swept through the building, and I think we're almost there here at the town building. As far as opening back public buildings back up to the public, we are really kind of monitoring and waiting for some guidance from the state. The governor does keep saying, where you don't need the public to come in, don't have them come in. So we do have many ways that the public can access town services, and we're just keeping that going for now. There aren't too many towns that are open, that have public buildings open for business right now. There are some, but the vast majority are not yet open to the public. So we're just continuing to monitor that. I think that's it.
Thank you. I think that wraps up our COVID update for this week. And no public comments. before I move to regular public comment, we've been requested that we just go ahead and continue the HDC appeal till next week, since we're already an hour and 15 minutes into the meeting. So if we could just open that public hearing and take a vote to continue it to the 10th.
Have you opened it yet?
Yep. Go ahead and make a
Can I
motion.
make a motion to continue it to the 10th?
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Rita Higgins,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. Thank you from attendees for being here, and we will take that up next week, hopefully with a slightly lighter agenda. Next, this is the public comment portion of our agenda for non-COVID related items. I do have one hand raised, Burton Balkind.
Can you hear me, Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, board. And I would like to just bring two things to the board's attention. Tomorrow, you guys are going to be talking about the SBPF, the legal standing there. And I just want to remind the board that you are representing the citizens of Nantucket as the property owners. And with their 3 violations of orders and conditions from the Concom, I just want you guys to if how you feel it was your property that they had dumped matter that had some fecal material in it and had dumped other things that really shouldn't be on a beach. And I appreciate you guys taking some time to deliberate that. The other thing I wanted to bring to the board's attention was we've had 2 seal shark interactions on our South Shore beaches over the last week, witnessed by a number of people. And I just want to, I know the board and the town did the Stop the Bleed program, which I think was really great. But also, I think maybe we should discuss Stop the Bleed kits that would be stationed at the beaches. I just wanted to put this on the board's radar for maybe future consideration. So I appreciate your time and all you've done to keep Nantucket safe. Thank you.
Thank you on both those points. We appreciate it. Bobby Planzer. Bobby, did you want to speak?
Sorry, I have to make him or allow him to speak, so it just takes a minute.
Oh, I'm on, I think. Am I on?
You're there.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to address something that Libby said earlier. I wanted to say that what she said got me very emotional. I wanted to say that we've been doing a lot of things, and I know what her and her family are going through is awful, and I wanted to address that the year-round community, that I'm totally in agreement with Libby that it is not her family's fault. So people need to just stop because it's not okay. So I am in total agreement. So thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised this evening. There's no new business to add. Approval of warrants and pending contracts, payroll and treasury warrants as one motion, please.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Rita Higgins.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
And then approval of pending contracts. I think there were a couple things to note on there.
So there are a couple of things. We have the grant agreement with the hospital on here for the grant of funds for the PCR testing. And this has been going between town council and the hospital council. And I think possibly right before the meeting started, or maybe during the meeting, we may have maybe finished it off a bit. John, I think could you maybe take us through that?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I just received, let's see. Yeah, so I just received word from, literally, from counsel for the hospital that the revised version of the grant agreement that I sent along is acceptable to the hospital. Erica, I think I copied you on that. I don't know if you have received that and could put it up.
Give me 1 second and I'll bring it up.
But essentially, it's a pared down version of the grant agreement that we had originally talked about. As you know, the FinCom has approved $100,000 from the reserve fund. The way this agreement is now structured, we would make it's only obviously for the PCR testing. We would disperse $50,000 upon execution of the agreement. Erica, could you just scroll down just a little bit? I want to just see about it's in yeah, okay. Yeah, this is the right version. Thank you. The agreement is before you. We disperse $50,000 upon execution of the agreement. And then once that $50,000 has been expended, the provider, the hospital, can make a request for the remaining $50,000, and that will be dispersed once, as long as the first $50,000 has been spent and accounted for. So there are provisions in here that do require the hospital to provide an accounting of how the money is spent, and any unused funds at the end of the study or the testing would be returned to them. There's no provision in here for any kind of a sharing of or that we would get back any additional funds if they did more fundraising. I know that had been an issue early on, but the boards decided to just make this $100,000 grant. It's fairly simple. If we get to the end and the hospital wants to request additional funds, we can certainly take that into consideration at that time and amend this grant agreement. But other than that, I think it's ready for approval by the board unless you have any questions.
I can't see everyone, but are there any questions? Is there a motion? Erica, could you take it down? So, thanks. Is there a motion to approve the contracts? Matt? Matt, you're muted.
No, I'm having trouble. I'm having trouble figuring it out. No, do we have the program, the PCR, the surveillance program developed yet, or is that still to be? I haven't seen that. Is that yet to be provided?
We have an attachment to the grant agreement that is a write-up of the PCR testing protocol. So we do have that, yes. And we have a provision in the grant agreement that the testing will be essentially overseen by the Board of Health and in accordance with any Board of Health protocols that the board issues. You got that, Roberto, right?
Yes, we've been working together on it.
Okay. Matt?
I move approval.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Rita Higgins?
Aye.
Matt Fay?
Aye.
Christy Parentella?
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Jason?
Were we reviewing the Dreamland a part of that, or is that a separate item?
There was one question I had on that earlier because it said fall, but it's actually from now until the fall. right?
So, sorry, that was the next item to go over. I thought you were still doing the hospital grant.
Just did a vote on the whole thing.
Oh, okay. Well, we should spend a moment going over the Dreamland. I'm sorry about that. Amy can maybe take us through, but there are some things to point out. And I think Dreamland might be on here too, if they want to say anything.
Yes. Thank
Amy,
you.
do you want the lease terms or the letter up?
Yeah, I think so.
License terms. Yeah. So as Erica will put up here, I did a summary of some of the things, the terms and things we need to work through. As you know, this has been an ongoing process for the past month or two. The Dreamland obviously wanted to do something for the community to get folks out and enjoy movies. So we have landed at the property on Nobadeer Farm Road, 7 Nobadeer Farm Road. Is a land bank property that we, forgive me if I say this wrong, lease through them and use with the community school that runs programs there in those fields. So the idea is to allow for this Dreamland drive-in, which there's a schematic, a drawing of the kind of the setup there too as well. It would be through the season into November is what the proposal is for. Would be most nights, I believe 8:45 p.m. when it gets dark for these movies. They, as we list here, have a online system for purchasing tickets. Their staff will be responsible for the operations of this. We went through, and I can answer any questions, and also Joe Hale and Alicia Carney, who have been incredibly helpful in this, are on this as well to answer specific questions. But it is a good property, allowing cars to come in. It has a really good kind of flow into there, so hopefully that will be not be disruptive to the neighborhood, which we have alerted the abutters to this as well. Thank you. As you see in there. Hopefully there will be a food truck or two as well that, again, will conform with all these COVID-related protocols as well. So folks will be in their cars watching this. It won't be obviously loud noise. It'll be through an app on the phone and things of that sort. So it won't be noise related. I have put in here if there are other sorts of activities that they do during this time that are different, that might require amplified voices, a microphone or sound of any kind, that it would require an additional permit. So anything outside of these parameters would require additional permit. We will still, this is like a liquor license where we're going to go over these terms, and there are still work to be done as far as inspections, things of that sort. We just need to agree to this so they can kind of go forward with that. It's going to require some, construction of some kind to put this screen up. There'll be an additional shed for the projector and such as well. So I think, we have here license conditions. It's basically a license. The Land Bank Commission has already reviewed this and agreed for this use. That's different than the normal use as well. No alcohol allowed as usual. This is just going to be the food service and non-contact type of setup as well. Nothing past midnight. They'll probably start setting up around 6 p.m. again and be done by midnight. And we'll be responsible as well for all of the maintenance, all of the trash pickup, and all of that sort of thing as well. As of now, no lawn seating or anything of that sort, unless some time comes where that can change. But as of right now, it is just in the car seating. So I think I'll see if there's any questions or anything too as well. The Dreamland here can answer any questions.
Can we take that down so I can see everyone? Jason? Then Christy? Sorry.
I think this is a great collaboration. This is the kind of like out of the box thinking that we need to do. It's going to be just tremendous for the community. However, I want to make sure that it goes really well. So my questions are, with what is it Public Works? Who will be helping get this set up from the town? How many hours is it going to be? Is it going to be a lot of work? And I think it seems like a great deal at $500 to charge that. And when it's all done, if there's any damage, who takes care of that? And there's probably gonna be more trash than we think. If the public works has to come in and help with trash cleanup, that kind of stuff, I just want to make sure we thought through that so there's no, it just doesn't get difficult between, because it sounds like a great collaboration. I'm going to, think through everything before we take off.
Yeah, I'll answer. Then I'll go to Dreamland too, as well, as far as the construction and all of that. So there will be, as far as there's insurance requirements, hold harmless agreements, and things of that sort, as far as conditions for a final signed agreement. If you agree to, these terms as is, that will be written in those instances. I have to say, in this situation, though, there are going to be amendments. We have to allow for adjustments in this to see how this goes. This is obviously a new business that normally would take 60 plus days, even just once it's all set up, to review and go through the process, and we're on our third location now. So we're going to have to allow for adjustments. I put in here some things as well. If there's traffic backups and, it could be suspended, or a police detail may be required until that is amended, or things like that with trash as well. So it's going to give us that opportunity to make these adjustments as we see and what happens. We have the dumpster provision in here as well for them to achieve that permit to allow for that sort of situation. And I will defer to the Dreamland to discuss the construction part of that of the screen.
Before we do that, Christy had her hand up, and we have a public question, and then I'll go to Joe. Christy?
Will the field still be available for play for soccer and other games?
Yes.
Okay.
T. Barada, I'm assuming that's Thomas Barada. You want to let him in, Erica, with his question?
Yes, Madam Chair. I have a question in regard. The licensing agent advised that all the abutters were contacted in regard to this proposal. Were the property owners and the Association of Milestone Crossing given notification of this?
I will, and I'm not sure, as far as, I'm not looking at the list right now. It's a legal list that we get for an entertainment license for the abutting properties, which would be direct abutters. So again, I'll defer to Alicia and Joe as far as that right now. I'm not looking at directly the list, but it's a legal list that's gotten through the, and I'm forgetting the name right now, office that we do, but it's the legal list that we require for that.
May I ask one other question?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
In regard to this being such a public event and a noise generating event, shouldn't we be expanding the radius of the actual notification of the abutters instead of being just one property lot, maybe 2 or 3 or within 100 yards of a radius of it? Because this will be a noise generating entity that will be late at night at 10:30 or 11 o'clock when people are leaving, and it will produce noise. So that may be an issue with the neighbors that are on Milestone Crossing and other areas of that neighborhood.
Joe, did you want to address those questions and whatever other statement you were going to make?
Oh, we've tried to really address the noise issue. As you know, we're going to have a transmitter that will transmit all of the sound for any movie, any event we do, to people's radio in their car or to their smartphone. So there will be no amplified sound at the drive-in at all. We wanted to be very careful about that. With regard to the trash, I just wanted to address that too. We have talked to Reese, and they will put a dumpster there. They will be there regularly to take out any trash. It will all be, segregated from plastic and what have you. So I think we've tried to cover that base as well. But getting back to the sound issue, in our opinion, there will be no sound because it'll be in people's cars or on their smartphone.
Okay, I mean, maybe the concern was traffic. traffic sound generation. But I know there's quite a bit of open space surrounding this site.
Quite a bit.
And I would say that again, we're gonna have to watch how this goes, but I think the Dreamland will be very responsible in how they manage this and with folks coming, because we don't want to have to pull this. It's a great opportunity for folks, so I know that they'll be conscious of that with folks and communicate that to folks coming into as well, to be respectful of that neighborhood. So hopefully there's enough space in there for people to move in and move out. Again, they won't be really coming out of their cars too much. We have a provision in here for portable restrooms should they be needed. Based on the number of folks coming in there as well, they'll be in charge of obviously sanitizing and keeping those up to the protocols as well. So, that's what we'll say there. But we, again, will be addressing this as we go through it. And if we have to address anything else, we can bring it back if we had to.
Matt, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I think it's a great proposal. I don't think there's going to be 1,000 cars in there. There's 3 lanes. There's not that large an area. I move approval.
We actually already voted approval, unless anybody wanted to rescind that vote, because we voted on all the contracts. But just before we go to that, was Eric Savetsky on for this? Okay, never mind. I'm assuming that we have the full support of the land bank on this.
Yes. They voted on this. Their commission did as well. So they've been part of the conversation throughout.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, we can move on to consent items. We have a gift acceptance, Our Island Home, Human Services, Saltmarsh Senior Center. Joe and Alicia, thank you for being here.
Thank you all very much. This will be one of the few places on Nantucket, I think, that we can gather safely this summer, even though we'll be in our own cars. So thank you very much.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you all.
So moving on to the gift acceptances. Is there a motion?
Motion to accept. Oh,
second.
All those in
write a letter. Thanks.
Thank you. All those in favor by roll call. Jason Bridges. Jason Bridges.
Aye.
You were muted. Rita Higgins.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Okay, next we are moving to open a public hearing. This is to consider the second half of the applicants for appointment. Let me just find my list here. I printed out the entire packet. I killed a lot of trees by doing that. It's really hard to have it on my screen. Okay.
Do you want me to screen share?
No, because then I can't see anybody. Or, well, actually, why don't you go ahead, because I'm still digging through. Started. Oh, actually, Erica, I do have it up now. Okay. I'm going to run through these, and then I'll take people as they raise their hands that have applied if they wish to make a statement. So we have planning board alternates, 1 seat, 1 applicant. Stephen Welsh, she's the incumbent.
Oh, you missed a page.
I did. Okay.
Affordable Housing Trust is first.
Got it. Starting with the Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we have 3 seats available, 2 at-large seats, and 1 real estate broker agent seat. 3 applicants for the at-large, 1 applicant for the broker. We have for at-large Rima Sherry and Howard Dickler and Allison Mitchell have all applied. Rima is the incumbent. Charity Grace Moffson has not reapplied. And Brian Sullivan is the broker applicant, and he is also the incumbent. Next, we have the Nantucket Historical Commission.
Sorry, are you going to let people speak as you read them, or are you reading?
No,
them
I'm going to take hands after I read through them all, like we did last week. I see Howard Dickler.
Sorry, I wasn't there.
He'll be going. Oh, right. He'll be going first. Nantucket Historical Commission. We have 2 seats available and 2 applicants. They are the incumbents, Georgia Raisman and David Silver. Nantucket Historical Commission alternates. We have 1 seat available and 1 applicant, Susan Handy. Next, we do have the Planning Board alternate, as I mentioned, Stephen Welsh, the incumbent. Real Estate Assessment Committee, 2 seats available, 2 applicants, both the incumbents, Penny Dye and Rhoda Weinman. Roads and Right-of-Way Committee, we have 3 seats available and we only have 2 applicants. We have 1 not reapplying. Bert Ryder will not be reapplying. Lee Saperstein and Nathaniel Lowell have applied, so there is an opening there. Scholarship Committee, we have 2 seats available and 2 applicants. 1 is Christy, and the other is Jana Duarte, both incumbents. Tree Advisory Committee, 2 seats, 2 applicants. We have Michael Mizzarelli and Whitfield Bourne. They are both incumbents. Zoning Board of Appeals, we have 1 seat available and 1 applicant. Michael O'Mara has applied. He's the incumbent. Last, we have Zoning Board of Appeals. We have 1 seat available. Zoning Board of Appeals alternate, excuse me. We have 1 seat available and 1 applicant, Mark Poor, who is the incumbent. And I will now go to Mr. Dickler.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Howard Dickler. I've been coming to Nantucket since the 60s. I hate to admit that. I've owned the house for over 20 years, and my wife and I have lived here full-time since 2015. I think the issue of affordable housing is key for the island. I don't think you can have a strong, vibrant, and united community unless everybody who works here can afford to live here affordably and safely. I've been very interested in the Affordable Housing Trust. I've attended many meetings over the past 3 years. I think they do a great job, and I'd like to contribute. I have a lot of experience with building houses, and I recently served on the Neighborhood First Committee, so I'm very familiar with the criteria that have to be considered when selecting sites and properties for affordable housing. I would work very hard and be a very loyal committee member if you should choose me. I'd be glad to answer any questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for applying. Are there any other applicants for any positions that would like to speak this evening? Please raise your hand. I see Lee Saperstein. Lee, go ahead.
Madam Chair, if you can hear me, members of the board, I am well aware of your time constraints on the agenda. So let me just say that it's with great enthusiasm that I apply. I realize I've been a member for quite a while, but yet there's a lot to be done. And by the way, on a personal note, I get a lot of benefit from participating. So let me thank the board for my time on the committee. Of all the things that we've got to deal with, public way monuments, sidewalks, roads, or ways to the beach, we are anticipating a new transportation planner, and we're looking forward to working with her or him, because there are times when the planner has asked us to participate in the public hearings, of which there's one coming up. There'll be another on transportation improvement plans. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you. I look forward to participation.
Thank you, Lee. We appreciate it. Georgia Raisman.
Hi, Dawn and board. First, I wanted to say thank you for appointing me for this past year. I've very much enjoyed being part of the Historical Commission, and I look forward to contributing more in the future. I think we're doing very helpful work. I hope the board agrees in finding good ways to help the DPW use our historical resources properly and reconstruct them when needed in a proper way. And secondly, I just want to say I really appreciate the time and effort that you all are putting in that's gotten to be heroic given this pandemic that we're all dealing with. So thank you very much for your prior appointment, and I hope you will appoint me for a successive term. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia. I don't see anyone else. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak during this public hearing? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing for this evening and move to the town manager's report.
Okay, so beaches for 2020. We have a lot of things that we are either going to have to do a little bit differently and get education out. So we are working on a plan that Sheila can or the chief can speak to, but I got a draft of it late today and I haven't had a chance to really go through it, but I do have a little bit of an outline that I think is made it to you all late in the day. I'm not even sure if it got to you, but as I think everybody knows, the state has issued guidelines for beach management throughout the Commonwealth, and it applies to all towns. It is not necessarily required. It is highly recommended to the extent that you can comply. So by category, let me just quickly go through what the categories are and what our sort of plan would be. Face coverings and social distancing. This is going to potentially be one of our challenges this summer with beach management. Thank you, Erica. We are going to have to use a lot of education, advocacy, setting by example, signage, and seeking voluntary compliance with these things. Social distancing at the beach is required in the guidelines. Again, it's recommended, as is most of this stuff. People are supposed to, not sit in large groups. They're to be distanced apart. There are specific distances mentioned in the regulations, which are online, or the guidelines, which are online. Face coverings must be used when you cannot social distance. So if you are able to social distance or you're with your family that you live with, face coverings are not necessarily necessary. We will have roaming ATV patrols to help address when we do not see compliance. However, our plan is not to enforce these things. Our plan is, again, to educate, advocate, set by example, and seek voluntary compliance. We are really relying on the public to do the right thing here. If we see a spike of cases that we somehow know came because people were clustered together at beaches, then we are going to be having a different discussion, I imagine. So let's not go down that road, and let's all really try to do this right. Parking and capacity is another category. In many towns, they have a very different parking lot setup than we do. They have attendants, they have paid parking at beaches. We don't have any of that, and we do not have a plan right now to limit parking in parking lots. However, there is a capacity issue at beaches where overstand vehicles are permitted. We have calculated what that capacity is based on the distancing guidelines, which is 12 to 15 feet between vehicles. And those capacities will be in our plan, which will eventually be, sooner rather than later, posted online and distributed to the board. Those capacities will be signed, monitored, tracked as best we can. If capacity is reached at any of these beaches, we will do our best to get an attendant to turn vehicles away until capacity is allowed again. We hope that this won't happen very often, and that we're not going to have attendants stationed there every day, all day. It will be mostly at the times when we know are the busiest. And hopefully we will not have to consider shutting beaches down to overstand vehicles because it's becoming a problem. Hopefully people will, again, voluntarily comply. Rental equipment. we don't have a lot of this either, but surfboards and things like that that are being rented will have to follow sanitization and cleaning guidelines, which I think they already know about, and will certainly help educate them. The lifeguards, I would have Sheila speak about the lifeguard program in a minute, but that's somewhat of a separate program, a standalone program, although it's part of the beach management, has many new components this year, including social distancing between the lifeguards, the public. They have different PPE that they're going to be needing to utilize, cleaning and sanitizing protocols, and United States Lifeguard Association approved rescue protocols, which I'll go to Sheila in a second about that. Restrooms and showers. Again, we don't really have bathhouses like a lot of other places do. We do have some, and those are going to require additional cleaning and sanitizing per the guidelines. Social distancing in lines as indicated by signage and floor markings. Food service is pretty much the same as it is going to be anyway for restaurants, including social distancing with lines. Trash disposal is potentially an issue. Carry in, carry out is recommended by the state with no touch lidless trash cans. Obviously, that is not going to work at most of our beaches, thanks to our friends, the seagulls and others. We are planning on regular trash receptacles with a normal pickup schedule, and those are being dealt with now. Phase 1 restrictions under the state's reopening plan. Showers and water fountains are closed during phase 1, so hopefully those things are going to open up effective on Monday. And I'm glad that Spruce brought up the issue with sharks, because we have had protocols in place since 2012, shark sighting protocols, and Sheila's crew is very well trained in this already. As he mentioned, there have been apparently some sightings, and the protocols are getting put into place. Sheila could also perhaps address the lifeguard schedule. So I would look to her now to just take us through the lifeguard program, and maybe Sheila just say when the beaches are going to start getting staffed up.
Go ahead, Sheila.
Okay, so the beaches are going to start getting staffed up on, the lifeguards are going to be in training from June 15th to the 25th. However, we have some experienced lifeguards that are going to start being on the beaches on ATVs rolling from June 13th moving forward. The weekend of June 22nd and 23rd, we're going to put some lifeguards in the stands on all but a couple of beaches, plus having the roving ATV patrols. In June 25th, all 9 beaches will be staffed and manned. So starting on June 13th, there will be lifeguards on the beaches in ATVs that can respond to typically guarded or unguarded beaches. As far as the training goes, we do have several new protocols that we have to follow that makes us COVID safe. We've got a really good training plan. We have it figured out how we can do it in groups of less than 10. I've run 90% of it by Roberto. He was, he approved of everything that we recommended. I sent him the final training plan just today, so I don't know that he's had time to read over it, but the people will be doing it in less than groups of 10. We'll be doing it outside as much as possible. If we are inside, we will have masks. Doing it that way. We are working with the Coast Guard, and we have made up some mannequins so that when we're doing practices, they're not touching each other. We're working with mannequins, life size, regular weight size mannequins. We worked with Heather Francis from Our Island Home has been helping us quite a bit with medical stuff and to make sure that we're in compliance with all of that. We have a checklist of the lifeguards so you're going to have to fill out every day when they show up to work. We have thermometers to check the temperatures that we'll be doing when they show up to work. And the USLA is putting out several practices that they want us to go by. We're following those, and we're reaching out to Cape Towns and other big communities, mostly year-round communities, to see what they're doing to do to make sure that we're in compliance and ahead of the game. So we're pretty confident in our plan. ATVs are going to be on the beaches later this year. because we anticipate the beaches staying crowded longer. So our ATV patrols are going to be from noon till 8 o'clock at night. So we'll have lifeguards around on ATVs until 8 p.m. And we're going to start that right off as soon as we get going. But we're on our way and we're ready to go, excited to go, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Sheila. A couple more points to make. We typically have a pre-season, mid-season, and post-season beach meeting with all of the various players, including the Conservation Foundation and the Land Bank and the trustees of reservations. And this year, we're going to have meetings probably at least starting out every 2 weeks. We had our first meeting this week. And I would go to, if they are able to, Cormac and Eric, if they want to add anything, as soon as I'm done making these points. Signage, we've gotten a few questions about signage. There's a consistent sign that is part of the Cape and Islands, I forget the whole name of it, Christy probably knows, Cape and Islands Regional Task Force for Economic Recovery, something like that. They are really trying to get consistent messaging throughout the Cape and Islands for a variety of things, including signage at beaches. And there's a template that's gone around. We have it, and we're planning to put it out at all 52 beach access points around the islands. The beach wheelchair program that is accessed through Public Works is continuing. They are aware of the sanitizing protocols and will be utilizing those. I've been on more than one, maybe 3 now, webinars or Zoom conferences having to do with beach management. And the enforcement of the social distancing and the masks and all that is an issue for every town. The manager of the Cape Cod Seashore was on one of the calls I was on, and his program, I guess, for the summer is to hyper-saturate the messaging and, again, heavily rely on voluntary compliance with these things, and really hope that people do the right thing and continually put that message out about why that's important. We do not want to get into enforcement by the police. The police, in fact, are not designated enforcement agents right now. If we have to get into that, they will need to be designated specifically by the Board of Health, and the Select Board will then need to specifically accept that and direct the police department to do the enforcement. And again, that is not something we want to get into, probably especially now. The chief maybe, and then I would go to Eric and Cormac about anything different at their beaches, but we are trying to, again, have consistent messaging locally among all of the beaches. But Chief, maybe just talk a tiny bit about the ATV patrols. We are trying to step them up a bit, but again, we are down CSOs this year, so it's not that easy.
Thank you, Libby. The ATV patrols, we're going to be able to maintain the same number of ATV patrols as we've had in prior years, but we're going to supplement those patrols with sworn police officers this year. So they will more likely be out there in the evening hours and into the night hours. We believe that because of the lack of restaurants and other entertainment venues, that the beaches will probably be a lot busier a lot later. So we will have essentially more patrols.
Thank you, Chief. Cormac or Eric, do you guys want to mention anything?
Thanks, Libby. Cormac Collier, the president of the Nantucket Conservation Foundation. Really, our position is no different than what Libby has expressed. We'll be working in tandem with the town to promote as much education and awareness to the public as possible on these guidelines. Our ability to enforce these guidelines, particularly with the wide range of beaches that we have, are going to be extremely limited. So we also echo Libby's comments on that. We own beaches for public access throughout almost all 4 corners of the island, from Cotu to Tom Nevers, Manicksham, Cisco, and Eel Point. So to try to enforce those recommendations are going to be difficult. So we will be taking a very proactive approach in terms of expanding our outreach and education for the visitors to most importantly, just take the self-responsibility to do what's appropriate and what's right per the state guidelines.
Thank you, Cormac. Okay, Eric?
Yeah, hi, Eric Sadetsky, Nantucket Land Bank. I think the town and staff have a good plan, and we want to work in lockstep with the foundation, the town, and adapt as necessary. But we appreciate the town's efforts in organizing and putting together a plan to address the whole issue for the summer. So it's really have nothing new to add to the conversation on that.
Thank you, guys. This is really a pretty strong team effort. So we're trying to get at it as best we can. I think that was about it.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to move on to the next item on the?
Sure. So the 2020 annual town election ballot questions and the annual town meeting warrant articles. This is really more about the annual town meeting warrant articles, but just to sort of confirm or restate the board's intent that regardless of what happens with the ballot questions on June 16th, the corresponding warrant articles at town meeting are intended to be postponed to perhaps a next town meeting or perhaps redone entirely at a later time. So, and that is in accordance with the effort to pare down the 2020 annual town meeting warrant to only the most essential of articles. We have gone through, you all went through these last week with us, and we went through them with the Finance Committee yesterday, and they have started developing revised motions for the articles that will need new motions because of our budget projections or other reasons. So I wanted to quickly take you through that. Is Denise on? Oh, Denise, there you are. Yes, thank you. And Denise, feel free to jump in if you want to add anything. So I wanted to do, I think, maybe about 4 things here. Review the pared down warrant articles with the motions and the revised motions. I would like Brian to re-review the fiscal 21 Island Home budget. We got to that late last week, and he's got a plan that admittedly to the people who aren't deeply involved in the development of budgets, it's not that, it sounds more complicated than it is. Let me put it that way. So we're trying to figure out a way to explain it easily. And then I want to review the public outreach schedule. So the warrant articles are pared down from 117 to, I keep needing to recount this because we've gone back and forth a few times, but I think we're down to 26. I've been saying 28 in some other correspondence, but I think it might be 26. And not to, get too boring about it, but the idea here is that the warrant that already has been printed for the town meeting that we were going to have on April 4th is sitting at the printer waiting to be sent out. So the plan is to send it out, and then it will immediately be followed by a letter to voters with a document that will be the list of articles that we intend to act on and any revised motions. And that will be in a small, hopefully as small as possible, packet that will go with the letter to the voters explaining all of this. So the idea, again, is that this little packet, it'll probably look something like that, will be the articles that are proposed for action at the June 25th town meeting. If there's in this document, if there's a change to a Finance Committee motion, a revised motion will be shown. And the motions for all articles proposed to be postponed would be to move to take no action on the article, and those will all be postponed, including the citizen petitions, hopefully with the concurrence of the petitioners, who will be advised that their articles will automatically be moved to whenever the next town meeting is going to be. So I'm just going to talk about the articles that have revised motions, which are as follows. Article 4, it is the revolving account spending limits for fiscal 2021. There's one change there. It has to do with the airport aviation fuel revolving fund. And Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but that is a change from a spending limit of 5.2 million to 2 million.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And then Article 6, which is the fiscal 20 general fund budget transfers. That article will have a revised motion right before town meeting. Because it's a fiscal 20 article, we want to wait until as late as possible in the fiscal year in case anything unexpected comes up that we could deal with at town meeting. So that motion will follow. Article 8 is the general fund fiscal 21 budget article. That will have a revised motion based on our revised revenue projections. And Brian, do you want to quickly talk about that? Because that article and Article 15, which is the fiscal 21 enterprise fund article, are interlinked.
Sure. Thank you, Libby. So based on the discussion that we had at the end of the meeting last night on what to do, or last week, excuse me, on what to do with the override question for Island Home and what the options were in the event it passed, which I think was the biggest question. I took all of the comments that the select board had made and went back over the last week prior to yesterday to try to figure out the best way to handle this. If everybody remembers from the May 13th presentation, and even before that, when we had proposed the override originally, we had always been holding $3.1 million in levy capacity, which was what we had projected before the override question would have to have been transferred to from the general fund into our Island Home. So what I have discussed with the town manager and what we presented to the FinCom yesterday was at the May 13th meeting, we had projected using $3.3 million of free cash to essentially balance Article 8, the general fund budget. What I've proposed is using the 3.1 million that we have in unused levy capacity within the levy limit in Article 8. So what that would do is rather than use free cash in Article 8, we would use free cash and retained earnings in Article 15, which is our Island Home in the enterprise fund budget. So essentially what we're doing is merely shift the free cash to the enterprise fund being our Island Home, use that unused levy capacity in this year's budget in Article 8. In the event, this way we would still it would be used and we wouldn't be tapping into the override dollars if we had tried to do a raise and appropriate on Island Home. So it simply just changes where the raise and appropriate is. It was money that levy capacity that we had always expected to use, be it if the override question had failed under normal times, we would have had to transfer it we would have had to have a special town meeting. So it's simply just transferring it here and then using the free cash that we were going to use in Article 8 to balance the budget to just use in Article 15 for the Island Home, which I believe accomplishes the request to not utilize the override if it were to pass at the ballot.
Follow?
Yeah, I tried to follow there, Brian. Can you go over that one more time, or can somebody explain it?
Sure.
Are we just using free cash?
We're simply using free cash to balance the Island Home budget. And the levy capacity that's always been reserved and been calculated to be utilized is going to be used in Article 8 rather than in Article 15. That's all I'm doing.
And so what kind of follow-up, Madam Chair? What explain that's different than when we were going to do? I mean, assuming that the budget override was not going to pass, we had another switch to this.
If the budget override doesn't pass, we could still use that. The question was what would happen if the ballot question actually did pass. This way, we're just merely waiting until that to be done so that we can give the voters enough information on how to properly understand how we're funding both of those articles within the warrant.
Okay.
Prior to the meeting.
But normally free cash is used for one-time expenditures.
That's correct.
We would normally use to fund the ongoing operations of the Island Home.
That's correct. And we will have to eventually deal with this situation in the next year or two at some point. But I tried to do this in a simple way. I know it's somewhat difficult to explain or to get out there in an easy to understand method, but this is the easiest way to solve all of the questions surrounding ensuring that if the ballot question did pass, that the override is not touched and implemented.
Is everybody comfortable with this? Okay, Denise.
Yes, Dawn, we had extensive discussions, obviously, yesterday at FinCom about it. Brian took us through it.
I didn't.
We are going to meet again tomorrow. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. No, I said we had extensive discussions yesterday at FinCom. We're going to meet again tomorrow to go over one more time Articles 8 and 15 after your decisions tonight. And we took quite seriously. Well, we always take quite seriously anyway. But we felt it was appropriate that we followed the policy set by the Select Board last week to not want to have any of the debt exclusions or the overrides that are on the ballot now be part of the town meeting discussion. So we took that into consideration as well.
Okay.
One of the things we've talked about just a tiny bit, and hopefully Denise is going to be our point person on this, is a kind of a graphic that can help explain this. Jason, I know you like that way of doing a visual, and I agree. This just I don't want to get caught up in it because people don't understand it because it's too hard to explain, even though it's really quite straightforward. So anyway, we are trying to work on an easier explanation. Okay, so maybe we'll run it by you.
Yeah, together with Brian.
I did not catch that.
I said, I'm sure together with Brian, it will be perfect.
Oh, Sarah. Sarah, I think, has a question.
I just want to be sure that we're really clear with the voters when we're talking about the procedure that we're using. Because I think it's a little complicated. The way that I'm envisioning this is basically having the warrant broken down into 3 buckets of articles, so that we would call the articles as we always have, and we'd end up with a bucket of uncalled articles, a bucket of called essential articles, and a bucket of called unessential articles. The uncalled articles would be voted in accordance with their finance committee or planning board recommendation, however that is in the warrant. The non-essential called articles would be the subject of a motion to pass over, and those are the ones that would go on to a future warrant. And then the essential called articles, and I'm hoping that will be a very small number of articles, are the articles that are essential to town operation that you've identified that we will have to discuss and vote on. Does that make sense? I just want to be sure that people understand exactly what we're doing, because I don't want anyone to feel that we've tried to pull a fast one on them.
I think that was a really good description of what the intention is. Jason?
Will we have a plan on what's going to go in those 3 buckets, or do we have a general plan? Like, we're going to tell people that this is kind of what's going to go in those 3. I love the 3 bucket idea, but if nobody calls anything, I'm just trying to think through the 2 different buckets of calling the articles.
My understanding, Jason, and I'm subject to being corrected by anyone else here, is that Libby and you all, with Brian and Denise and the rest of the finance committee, you'll identify what the essential articles are, so we can let the voters know of the 117 articles that are on the warrant. These are the, I don't know, how many are you down to, Libby? 30?
I think either 26 or 28.
Okay, so these are, say, the 26 articles that are essential. We will discuss them if they're called. We won't discuss them if they aren't called. Here they are. Here are the new recommendations. Anything else on the warrant, if you have a concern about it, you think it should be discussed, call the article, let me know. You don't have to come to the meeting. You can let me know ahead. We have these forums coming up that I'm sure Libby will tell you the dates of. If I tell you, I will tell you the wrong dates. But if someone comes to the forum and says, I'm concerned about articles, whatever, I don't even want to say a number because I don't want to prejudice any particular article. but I'm concerned about this article. I want to call it. I will write it down, and that article will go into the called articles and will be passed over and put on a future town meeting without the need to get signatures. There will still, just to be clear, have to be the regular hearings, finance committee, planning board, public hearings for whatever that new warrant is whenever we get there. But whoever the citizens were that put the article forward, they won't have to get the signatures, but they will have to go through another public hearing process.
Is that clear to everybody? Okay. Do we need a vote on the?
Well, I wasn't quite done going through the articles themselves. The Article 10 is the general fund capital article, and there is a revised motion there which removes many of the items that were going to be funded. There's some that were going to be funded through an override, and I think there were some others that were going to be funded through free cash, Brian, or the tax levy.
That's correct. We've removed all of the articles that would have been removed by items, would have been funded by free cash as we had presented on the 13th. And we have removed from that and stricken out all of the items that were contingent upon the capital exclusion.
Okay. Okay, so that's 10. And then Article 15, we've just gone over. That will have a revised motion. Article 16, we need to bring to your attention. This is the enterprise fund capital. Please don't freak out, but we had to add a rather large item, which everybody knows about. It's the third sewer force main. But Brian, you want to explain it?
Yes. So back in August of 2019, our OPM on the third sewer force main, Hazen and Sawyer, submitted a application to the SRF loan program for the construction services for the construction of the new third sewer force main, which we have design money and is currently being worked on. That application went through the process with SRF, and in late February, early March, we were notified that we had made the preliminary plan and ultimately notified that we had made the final plan for that to receive SRF funding. Typically, you have to have the authorization in place by June 30th of 2020. We, through Hazen and Sawyer, talked to DEP and told them that due to the timing, it would be very difficult to get that accomplished before June 30th of 2020. They had originally agreed to extend it, and through COVID, they extended all of the timelines for authorizations of funding through to October. Now that we're having trying to have the annual town meeting in June, we need to put a warrant article on in the capital articles for the enterprise funds to authorize funding. And the number is extremely large that's been approved. It's $32 million. If we don't actually authorize this at the town meeting, we will have to notify DEP that we won't be able to meet the deadline for the funding, which will then remove it from the intended use plan for this year and will require us to resubmit an application in August and then attempt to get funding at the next town meeting that we have once we're on the plan, which design is moving, I won't say rapidly, but it is in progress. They've walked a couple routes and they're beginning to try to understand the best possible alternatives. So all this would do is authorize us to continue. It would authorize the amount, but it would authorize us to continue the loan application and continue the process of getting SRF funding for this project at a low interest rate. So I did present this to the town manager and explain that this is a timing issue that we really do need to address and put this on because it will slow down the process by waiting another year to potentially begin construction of another force main from the C Street pump station.
Matt?
Hey, Brian, for the public, what's the difference between the interest rate from the SRF funding and normal bonding?
Well, so the SRF program has between 0 and 2%, depending on a certain portion is 0%. So some of it is related to timing on how we get it. But if we were to go out and bond on our own, we would more than likely probably pay, by my estimate right now, anywhere between 50 to 60 basis points higher than the 2% cap on the note. So it is to our benefit to authorize it and participate in this program, knowing that the max interest that we would pay would be 2% versus the vagaries of the market when we eventually get there to permanently borrow it.
So basically, we're saving millions of dollars.
We potentially could save millions of dollars, yes.
Okay, so that was Article 16. Article 17, as I mentioned, is the Enterprise Fund Fiscal 2020 budget transfers, which we're going to wait till a little closer to town meeting so we have more of the fiscal year underneath us. And I think that was it for revised motions. So FinCom, I think, will approve any outstanding ones that we're ready to do tomorrow. And we'll get this voter letter out with this little packet of revised articles. And with regard to public outreach, we have the following items happening. Okay, so we have two forums, two pre-town meeting forums. One is Tuesday, June 9th at 5. The other is Thursday, June 18th at 5. And as I mentioned earlier, there would be an intro by either the Civic League or the Select Board Chair. Oh, by the way, both of these are going to be posted as FinCom and Select Board meetings, just in case, but you all are encouraged to get on there if you can. We'll review the pared down warrant plan. We'll review individual warrant articles and motions as we did just now. And then the moderator will review how the town meeting will run, as she just basically did. And we'll have Q&A. And probably I'll work Nancy in there at some point to review the safety protocols that we're going to be putting into place at the town meeting for the public's, health safety. On Tuesday, June 23rd, couple of days before the town meeting, the Finance Committee will meet at 1 o'clock to review any final motions, and the moderator will have the usual pre-town meeting conference. Other outreach that we're doing, we're going to have the weekly announcement at the board meetings, the letter to the voters that I mentioned. We are working on a letter to the editor to explain these things. We're going to be working on a town manager e-newsletter specific to town meeting. We have posts beginning the week of June 8th on all of our social media platforms. We will be updating the town website as new information comes in or updated or anything like that. We'll be doing a radio interview sometime the week of June 15th. Not sure who's going to do that just yet. The moderator and I did NCTV Pulse of Nantucket last week to start explaining this. And we'll be working with the INM to get information out on act.net and probably some ads. And if anybody has any other suggestions, let us know. Oh, I was also going to try to do a letter or an email to the citizen petitioners to explain this directly to them. Any questions? Anybody? Jason?
No question, but I think the outreach sounds really great. I love the forums that, 2 forums and the letter to the voters. I think what people seeing it in print is going to be really important. So I'm glad that's, a couple of those are going to go out.
And maybe Jason, you could do a coffee talk on it, or what your Facebook thing is called.
I've been trying slowly each morning.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. I think that's it, unless anybody has anything else on town meeting. I should ask. Denise, Sarah, and Nancy, do you guys want to add anything?
No, I think you covered it, Libby. The only thing that I mentioned was I wasn't sure everyone on FinCom would participate at town meeting in person if they felt uncomfortable. I definitely will be there at town meeting. And I also think it's, at this time of COVID, it's very difficult to say to people, yes, you have to be there. Understanding that potentially we could have a technical amendment that morning that we would have to be in person for, but we would know that the morning of town meeting.
Oh, Nancy?
I don't really have much to add other than to say I understand what Denise is saying. That's true for some of the election workers. And, it's understandable. People have to make their own personal decisions. And I also agree with Jason that outreach will be important. And I think I think Libby has the plan. We're covering it every way that we can. And also just to add that the early voting has just been gangbusters compared to what, absentee voting would be for a usual town election. So a lot of people are certainly taking advantage of that for the election.
Do we need to take an action tonight?
No, but I wanted Sarah to add anything.
I just wanted to add, I hope that people understand that this town meeting is going to be like no other town meeting we've ever had. We're going to require everyone's help and patience and cooperation. When you come, you're going to have to sit where we tell you. It's not going to be where you want to sit. It's not going to be how you want it to be. It's just going to be how it is. And we're working really hard to make it as safe and quick as possible. And we're going to count on everyone who comes and everyone who stays home, actually, to cooperate with us. So it's a community effort. We're all in this together. Just please don't expect it to be like how you want it to be.
A couple more really quick things. Sarah did give us a moderator's guide to like a COVID-19 town meeting, which we've been following very carefully and consulting with along the way. Also, this afternoon at 4:00, there was a webinar that sponsored by Mass Municipal Association for towns about how to hold a COVID-19 town meeting. And I wasn't able to be on the whole thing. And they started out talking about the rule changes for representative town meetings, which does not apply to us. They talked to a town manager who just had a town meeting outside, which does not apply to us. But I didn't know if Denise, I think you were on it, and I'm not sure anybody else got onto it, if there was any great information that came out of it. It was one of the presenters, by the way, was our very good friend Lauren Goldberg from KP Law.
Denise?
Yeah, I did. I did attend it. I attended it to about 4:55, Libby, and they were just getting into what the different towns had done, which was kind of the juicy part, if you will. And the good news is they're going to send us the recording tomorrow. So anyone who registered for it, we will get the recording. So I don't know, Nancy, maybe you got to stay on it longer than I did. But it was quite interesting to hear what the options were and what people were trying to do. I found it very constructive, so I was happy I could be on it for the hour at least.
I was able to attend the whole thing, and as Libby said, some of it wasn't relevant to us, a representational town meeting or folks that had a town meeting outside, which I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit jealous of that. But there were a couple of good tips. I took notes, but I felt that most of what was discussed had honestly already been made known to me through the Mass Moderators booklet and things like that. But it was still well worth doing. Absolutely.
Great. All right. I think unless anybody has any other questions, that's it for the town meeting update. Next up is a status on resuming non-regulatory remote committee, board, and commission meetings, which I think Erica is going to update us.
Okay. So we're underway with non-regulatory meetings. I have sent out emails to pretty much all of them, at least the ones that are, active the majority of the time. I've heard back from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that they do want to start meeting soon. So our first non-regulatory board meeting is this Friday. We are going to be using regular Zoom, and the meetings will not be videotaped. Or they will not be shown live on YouTube. I'm sorry. They will be recorded and they'll be posted to the town's government TV YouTube channel after the fact. But these are boards that don't usually have regular attendance at them. If they do, it's only a couple. But people have been very appreciative that we have restarted their meeting process. We have set up with IT 3 committee Zoom accounts, so I'll be managing those, and That's about it, except I do just want to put a reminder out, and it's for all committees, regulatory and non, because we have to balance all the accounts and the regulatory boards that need to go to YouTube. All committees need to check meeting dates with me first, because we can't have overlapping. And so before anything is planned, it would be prudent to contact me in advance.
Jason?
Erica, will people be able to watch online? Will they be as a picture just like us? Because we won't have attendees and a panelist.
So we won't have attendees on the side. They're not using Zoom webinar, but the Zoom accounts will all be, the Zoom links for those specific meetings will all be listed on the agendas and the postings, so that the public will have the opportunity to log into the Zoom meeting and participate or listen if they choose, if they want to be part of it live. But otherwise, people will be able to see it online after the fact.
Jason?
Thank you. That's really great to hear, because I think people are more interested in town government, and so I think this will be a way for more people to get involved. So I'm glad that that's an option. So thank you for bringing that up.
Do you think we need to reserve an extra time slot in case any of this permitting stuff comes up before the whole week is full at all? Do we need to reserve a second select board time?
Are you asking me or your board?
I'm just asking administration and my board. Like, I guess more.
I mean, I think it's more your board. It's up to you guys. I can, we'll make something work for you, but you have to be flexible with your time.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit worried that these meetings are going to be very heavily scheduled. Matt?
I think we should. I'm not, and I'll make the time to be there. I think it's important that this doesn't drag out a week and a half or 2 weeks because we can't find a slot.
Jason?
I'm fine with doing something on Friday the 12th or that next Monday as a placeholder. If we get through it all on our next meeting, then we do. And again, I think I don't know what the board thinks about this. If 3 or 4 of us attend, are we okay with that?
Yeah, whoever work. I'd love to reserve something for the 11th if we could. But Christy?
I was just going to say that I think reserving something at least to be prepared and have the time reserved, and then I'd be okay if I couldn't make it, trusting that the rest of the board can handle it.
I can certainly plug something in on the 11th if you want. It would have to be before 12:30 because the afternoon is full. Friday the 12th is completely wide open, and Monday the 15th, it can be anytime before 3:30 p.m.
What is everybody? Jason?
Are we thinking to have something on the 11th because we wouldn't be able to get to it all on the 10th? Or do we want to have it a little later because staff needs more time, and 2 extra days would help them, put things more quickly through the process? You know what I'm trying to say?
Maybe, well, what do we think? Friday or Monday then? Maybe Monday the 15th.
I'm just addressing what Leslie was saying about giving a little more time. But if it's more, we have a giant amount, we can't get through it on the 10th, then the 11th is fine.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking later in the day on the 11th, so that's probably not enough of a spread. Christy?
I think Leslie and Amy should be part of the discussion of kind of what they're handling so far and maybe what they think. Will we be able to get through it on Wednesday, or would Thursday be needed? So maybe this could kind of be talked about offline tomorrow and ask them if Thursday or Friday is better.
Yeah, why don't we do that, and we can poll the board with a couple of different day and time options.
That makes sense.
And what I can do too is just make a photocopy of the calendar or I'll scan it and I'll send it out to everybody, including Leslie and Amy. And that way you guys have a clear indication of what meeting times are available.
Okay, that sounds good. Leslie, you're off the hook for tonight. Okay, are we good on that agenda item and ready to move on to the next one?
So the next one is, I would look to Erica as well. We've had some internal discussion about modular house moves and whether to allow them in our restricted time between June 15th and September 15th. So, Erica?
Sure. So originally we had, in the town administration office and along with the police department, had discussed allowing modular moves to extend throughout the summer, just because the companies had lost at least 6, some 8 weeks with the construction shutdown. But it came to light that there were some concerns because most modulars are a standard size, standard height, standard width, not too long, and they're fairly easy to move through the downtown corridor out of town. Richmond does have a unique modular system that they use that is over wide and sometimes very long. And because they are over wide, it requires eliminating parking temporarily along Washington Street from about Salem Street to Coffin Street. And so there was some concern about that. And of course, normally these aren't allowed at all because of the traffic flows. But with the, we want to help accommodate these companies and get houses built for people. And not really knowing how the traffic's going to be right now, it almost seems like it could potentially be a lot lighter than it has in the past. I have had internal discussions today with Paula Leary, the NRTA administrator. I've spoken with Phil Paston quite a few times, as well as Kim Marks, whose company is Atlantic A-List, which is the hauler for all of these. And it sounds like that they have come up with a solution that might work for everyone, which is to do an early morning move. Normally they don't move till about 8:30 in the morning, which means they come through in the morning, they close off the street for a time period, and then they follow that and reopen the street as the structure goes through. This would allow it to be blocked off early before most businesses are open. There is concerns too because of the NRTA buses do park on that stretch of Washington Street as well for their shuttle service. But Paula feels that 2 of the buses can be relocated onto the Greenhound or adjacent to the Greenhound property closer to Wilk Square. So it seems like it's a doable thing. The only thing is, in your addendum packet today, there was a list of Richmond move dates. They do go through, I want to say July 20th. So that is extended pretty far into our season. There's also I want to call it a regular house move, a real house move, of an existing home that somebody wants to relocate on the island. That right now, if allowed, would have to occur after June 15th too. So I'm really looking to the board for a policy on this because it's difficult for me to say yes to some and no to others. And, we want to be fair and we want to allow these buildings to be reused and for people to be able to build their homes.
Chief?
Yeah, Erica, could you maybe answer the question? It's my understanding that these house moves were not moves that were scheduled before the shutdown. These are actually something that's new and has just come up. Is that correct?
That is correct. There was one building of Richmond's that it's actually a 2-day move that they're proposing for the week of June 15th. I want to say it's the 16th and the 18th or something like that. There's some dates in there that were a carryover from the COVID shutdown, but the rest of the dates are all new move dates that were not anticipated and would otherwise have to wait until September. And, you know, originally when we discussed this, we were talking about allowing the kind of just making up time for the buildings that had been already scheduled, but this is a new slate.
Well, did some of these things arise because they actually couldn't even file for building permits for a long period of time, though?
It was multifaceted. The construction companies that were producing the houses, Huntington Homes is one.
I mean, the regular house moves.
Oh, this last one that came up that is brand new on my radar. I have no idea why it's this last minute request. That was never on the schedule or never discussed until this week.
Jason?
I think it's okay moving past June 15th. That way nobody has to pick and choose and play favorites. I just think will have to be more communication than we've done in the past. I did speak with Phil Paston today, and he said they're planning on using the 10:30 p.m. boat to get the extra wide ones over, which would arrive at 4:30. Once the steamship leaves, they can move through, and they usually couldn't do that because of the school buses. But now that there's no school buses, that's an option for them. So if they're moving through town by 7 or 7:30, that's pretty much a no-brainer, right? There doesn't have to be that much communication. We just, they're done pretty early. So I thought that was a great option for that. And if there has to be some that's a little later, we just have to really communicate and figure it out so businesses can adapt and everybody knows what's going on.
Matt?
I have sympathy for the ones that were scheduled and couldn't happen. And I think if they're done by 9 in the morning, that'll be fine. I am very worried about opening this up to additional house moves just because the numbers of vehicles are increasing. My drivers are seeing it on the road. They're getting caught behind traffic now in the normal places. Every day it's a little bit busier. And I think that we have to be very careful because this just becomes, a nightmare for the police, for the staff. Why did we do it? What were we thinking? So I think we should be very hesitant about adding new people know the dates. And, I've moved a couple of houses. I know the dates. I'd like to help. And if it can be done by 9, great.
Christy?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Matt. And I was just wondering kind of how much of this is going to affect our shy list. Were they able to pull the building permits in time? I know that they have strict guidelines on when houses have to be complete at Richmond. Is this part of affordable housing or are these just different houses?
I can't answer that. I don't know. One thing I did want to say, though, is the building permits do have an exception on them, even though we technically have this moratorium between June 15th and September 15th. Moves may occur before 10 a.m. That's printed on the permits. So modular moves could technically fit under that. House moves are way more complicated, and there's no way they'd be off the road by 10. And that would be like a recycled house move.
Jason?
I guess I should ask you, Erica, and Chief, is that a viable option? The 10:30 p.m. arriving at 4 for those extra wide, can that even happen? I mean, I'm told that if they're through by 7:15, it's a no-brainer for everybody. Is it viable?
I would defer to Chief just to see if he has available police detail, but in terms of permitting, it's fine.
The permitting is the easy part of that one.
Yeah.
We'll have the people to deal with it. It's what the problem will be is if people get parked in there early, and we'll have to tow a lot of cars out. And that's what we don't like to do, because people park and then they go to work and we don't have any idea where they are. We try to find them and it becomes an effort. So we'd have to be down there pretty early to take care of that.
And it's the cars that are parked there the night before, right? If they leave them there, you can't move them.
Correct. If I could just say, I'm not as concerned about the modulars, because I think, other than those long ones, I think we can maybe work that out. That house move, that's new to me, and I am concerned about that, because those usually take up the entire road, not just part of the road.
Do you just have one request for a house move, or are there or are there multiples?
Just one at this time.
Okay.
The rest are all module.
And so realistically, they would be able to schedule it for September.
Yes, if it was still available.
Matt?
From where to where and when do they want to do it?
Give me 1 sec.
I mean, what's the pleasure of the board on the modulars? Are we fine with it if it's before? Jason?
It's tough because I don't want to look like I'm just trying to protect my business. There are other businesses, Fresh, and other people that are open really early. If they're coming through at 9:30, it's going to be tough. If they can get through by 7 or 7:30, it's not a big deal. Outside of what Chief is saying, can you get them through if there's 2 or 3 cars there right in front of Forest 5? Can you get them through? It was easier in the winter. So I don't really want to make the motion because it's of not allowing the extra wide ones, not the regular modules. 7:30, I'd want the consensus of the board.
I mean, could we say something like they've got to be done by 8 a.m. and that we just approve it until the last date that's currently requested? Did you say it was July 20th? And then plan on taking August off, when we'll probably see the biggest increase in population? Rita, and then Chris.
Yeah, I would think that would make more sense than not accepting any new ones, just the ones that are already there. And I just had a question for Chief. Where do we tow? If you had to tow people, where do you tow them to?
If we have to tow them, we call whichever one of the 2 tow companies is available. They come pick it up. They tow it to their lot, and then the person has to go there to retrieve it and pay the tow bills.
Rita, you have a follow-up?
Well, I'm just wondering if in this kind of situation, if we're going to allow this, if they could be towed to the town parking lot, and then, I don't know if we can, I see you shaking your head no. I just wish there was some way that we could make it so they didn't have to pay for, get all the way out to the lots and pay for them if we're trying to make this exception.
It'd be difficult for them, and it'd be risky for them to be towing a vehicle into a public parking lot, because if they damage somebody else's car, the town's going to own that. It's really that's why we do the notice and everything else, so that the liability's on them.
Christine?
I'm comfortable with moving forward with the guidelines that it's wrapped up by maybe 8:30. Something that I was just concerned about is kind of saying that we're not going to accept any new requests. And this kind of feels like Erica wanted a policy, and we have 1 request from Richmond and 1 request from a house move. So I think I'd want to give it a little bit of time if there's other people that want to request this, or is it going to be a policy that we're going to allow this through July 20th? Just a little bit more discussion on that.
Erica? Oh, you're muted.
Huntington Home, if we're looking at modulars, I know that Huntington Homes is not interested in moving their product through Nantucket in the summer. They have 1 date, which is going to be June 23rd, which is beyond the timeline. It was a carryover from the COVID shutdown that we have allowed them to do, or allowed them to schedule. Richmond has this one request for various dates. And then the one from Structures Unlimited for this house move, but I'm really not anticipating any more. But I do think that somebody's going to, if we don't have a policy or some kind of guidelines, somebody's going to say, well, you let them do it, so why can't I? And I'm not really sure how to respond to that.
Jason?
Can we break it into two different segments? You have house moves that don't require any parking being moved, and then house moves, whether extra wide or long, that require parking to be moved, the night before. I see it as two different categories. One's a little easier than the other. And so the one that needs to be parking moved should be limited to, even 7:30. I mean, I'm hearing that they can get through town by 7:15 a.m. So we should, for the extra long ones, would need parking moved.
And that's pretty much all of Richmond. So
right.
All of their dates.
I mean, I'd be comfortable doing something through the end of June that for whether it's house moves or regular modulars coming in. Because I do feel like even if things weren't in before the March shutdown, there might be things that people wanted to do that just they couldn't even come in and apply. But realistically, to even get something in place by late June is going to be challenging. I don't think you're going to see a lot of them because they have to advertise and they have to go through the utility disconnect process. They're probably really feasibly looking at September anyway. And I don't know if maybe we need to allow things to start right after Labor Day or what kind of provisions we could do. But I'd like to try to avoid as much as we can the height of the season. Except for maybe these Richmond things if they can be done by 7:30.
So, Don, what you just said, though, going through the end of June, that would leave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dates of Richmonds that would not be able to go forward, or are you talking about house moves?
I was talking about house moves and other modulars, but I was talking about allowing Richmond as long as they can commit to being done by 7:30.
Okay.
And only through the dates that they've requested, which I think the last one was July 20th. Jason?
And 7:30 I think is good because not that I'm a transportation expert, but every time I come around the corner of Washington Street and Francis, you see all the gas trucks are coming through at 7:50, 7:45. So they would need to be probably out of there right before 4 or 5 of those gas trucks come through.
Yep. So we're thinking Richmond, commit to a 7:30 out of town time through their July 20th request. And then the rest of them, no other companies or no other kind of moves beyond June 30th?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I'm thinking. And do we normally restart September 15th? Do we want to allow it to restart right after Labor Day?
And Labor Day is late this year?
The 6th or the 7th?
Labor Day is the 7th. So they could start a week early, that Tuesday the 8th, potentially.
Yeah, or maybe make it Wednesday the 9th. Matt? And we may have a pretty busy fall. I think of people, if kids aren't going back to school in some places, people are going to stick around, I think, a little bit. You know, people have come early this year. And so I'm happy with September 15th. You know, I like Don's suggestion of end of June, we're done. I just think that, you know, again, the ones who had, you know, really were held up is one thing, but opening this up in the summer when we're unsure how busy the summer will be and what's going to happen, just because, I think would be a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be fine with just leaving it at September 15th. I was just trying to, you know, alleviate things a little bit because I think people were delayed for a couple of months in just whatever their planning process was overall, where they might have been submitting permits.
Don, I like your suggestions. I had a question for Chief on, is there anything that we can do that's not hugely burdensome for, you know, the cars that are left out at night? I mean, can we call them? I would hate for people to be towed. But I know there's maybe no other choice. You probably already called them first anyway, if you can.
Well, believe me, the police officers, the last thing they want to do is tow cars because the paperwork that goes with that is a lot harder than just trying to find them. Okay. So I can't remember the last car we've actually had to tow because they work hard to do it.
Erica?
Just back to the recycled house move. It's from 12 Darrymore Road to 96 Myacomet Ave. And I'm assuming they would have to take Cliff to Nantucket Road to get to its final destination because North Liberty is shut down for construction. It's not huge. It's 14 feet high, 20 feet wide, and 28 feet in length, but there are some narrow roads that it's going to have to go through, and it's going to really slow down traffic in that area while it's moving.
So, but that would fall under the June 30th. So if they could get it all permitted before,
if they can get it
then
advertised and everything, they could do it.
They can schedule it for September 15th. Is what we're kind of heading towards. I think once we get past July 1st, just like with the parking, we've got to be realistic that the island's going to be a lot busier. But I think we do have to accommodate Richmond because it is going to equate to our shine numbers, as Christy was talking about, and it was all scheduled before all this started. Is that fair? As long as but again, they have to be out of there by 7:30 in the morning. They got to be through.
Yeah, I talked to Paston and he said that they're doing that 10:30 barge and they get there at 4:30 in the morning. Like I said before, wait for steamship to pass. So if that works for them and they're out by 7:30, I think that's a good compromise.
Matt and Christy both had their hands up. Who wants to go first? Christy?
I had a question, but Jason just answered. I just wanted to make sure that Richmond could do that by 7:30.
Yeah, and
it's our understanding that they can.
If they're out by 7:30, I'm fine with that. But my understanding is that they weren't planned. The chief said that these were added on after.
The first set, so the first two dates that they have proposed, which is June 17th and June 19th, are carryovers. The rest are all new.
Oh, okay. But it's all house. Is it all house related? It's all the apartments.
Oh, yes.
The apartments or the houses.
I think the first two are the last apartment building, and the rest, I believe, are houses. Is I think how Phil explained it to me.
Okay. And the last date you said is July 20.
Yes.
And they're doing it so early in the morning that it shouldn't have a huge impact. So is everybody comfortable with that? And to extend the house moves till June 30th? Anything that can actually be permitted between now and then? Does somebody want to make a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call vote: Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Matt Fay.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Rita Higgins.
Aye.
And Don Holgate, aye. Erica, that's the direction you were looking for, right?
It was. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you. Wow, well, I guess we're done with town manager's report. Thanks, Libby. Are there any committee reports? We'll probably be getting back to more of that now that we'll have more subcommittee meetings happening. And we put over the HDC appeal. So we're really off the hook tonight. It's not even 8 o'clock. Good job, everybody. Everybody wish John Giorgio a happy birthday again.
Happy birthday, John.
Happy
birthday, John.
John, thanks for spending your day with us. I'm sure it was an amazing night for you.
Can I have a motion?
Thank you so much.
Second.
By roll call vote: Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Matt Fay. Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Rita Higgins.